Hi, we're here at the Women in Tech Global Forum panel with a team of AI and ethics and focus today on removing bias from AI. I'm Raluca and I'm the CTO and co-founder of Ethic, a startup focused on developing software solutions to solve the algorithmic bias problem. And here with me we have Isabel, Terolyn, and Eve. I will quickly introduce each of them. Terolyn Forsyth is co-founder and head of product at Futurefit AI, which is a data-driven platform with a mission to make career transitions better through AI-powered career guidance. Terolyn's work involves using data, AI, and social science in both policy and tech environments, in anticipating and solving for societal impacts of AI in the workforce. Terolyn is also an avid researcher and has contributed to data-driven research at the frontier of the future of work. Moving on, we also have Isabel Mashola. Isabel is an engineer, has an engineer diploma, and she is president and co-founder of IAIAS, an internet socially oriented platform for outsourcing digital tasks. Her international vision has enabled her to shape her strong interest in certain social causes. For instance, the defense of women's rights and also poverty in the world. This has made her create IAIAS. IAIAS supports French companies in the data management and processing data space, as well as in computer vision in NLP, by having work outsourced to women in Africa, Asia, and South America. Today, IAIAS gives work to more than 1,000 women across 32 countries, and its ambition is to give work to 10,000 women within the next 3 to 4 years. Next, we have Eve. Eve Logunova is the founder and managing partner at Evanes, a lifelong DEI ambassador and Women in AI Ambassador Netherlands. She is known in Europe as one of the powerhouse female ecosystem builders and AI leaders to follow in 2021. Eve's passion lies in inclusive and ethical technology application, AR, AI and 3D VR, future of work, social equality, and women's empowerment. So yeah, welcome everyone to the panel. Hopefully you'll be enjoying yourselves today, and we'll give a good kind of overview conversation for our audience. The general theme today, it is algorithmic bias. However, we'll focus on a specific angle of it. So there, as we all know, automated decisions can yield to discrimination against certain demographic groups, whether it's based on gender, ethnicity, or age, or other type of demographics. And we all know that there are numerous causes and fixes to this problem. The data often comes up, but today we will focus on other angles, on other causes, diversity in the creators of these AIs, how this data gets collected, and generally how things are approached so that we can mitigate some of this problem outside the narrow topic of algorithm optimization. Great, okay. So I guess I have first a question for Isabel. And it kind of we're diving straight in because it's an interesting angle to solving a problem such as algorithmic bias and bias in the AI space in general. So the work IAIAS does involves outsourcing some labeling tasks for machine learning to workers in Africa and South America. Now, Isabel, how do you think that might impact the end algorithms, and is kind of diversity at the core of what your clients are asking you to do? Is it one of their concerns? And how do you think that fits within the general ecosystem?
Okay, thanks for giving me the opportunity. So yes, IAIAS is a socially oriented platform that takes digital project from customers, divide this digital project into digital task, and we call the crowd. It's a crowdsourcing platform, and the crowd is a woman. The woman connects on the platform and can do the work. So today we have, as you said, more than 1,000 women across 3 continents, Asia, South America, and Africa, English and French-spoken African. And this diversity coming from women belonging to various culture, various continents, helps in the learning of those algorithms, because as you can expect, a woman from Africa, even French-spoken Africa, doesn't see the same things as an English-spoken African person, or an Asia, and Asia is big, or even from South America. So our clients, in fact, are requesting. When we decided to build IAIAS, our ambition was to help as much as possible women in the world. And yes, we have a target to give work to 10,000 women within the next 3 to 4 years. But we were not clear on to those women, because we started in Africa based on the previous experience in an association. Our customers, big customers such as L'Oréal or Sodexo, requested us to have women coming from different continents. If you take 2 examples, L'Oréal, we are doing face recognition. Well, as you are looking at the face, it's evident that a black face is different from a European face or from a South American face. And so coming from these different continents helps you to first be able to annotate in a good way. And then with your behavior, your thinking, you annotate in a different way. And so you have the diversity. It's the same as another client which is in the food industry, and having the picture coming from different continents, this diversity helps. And finally, the way you're coming from different continents, where you have to annotate, either through NLP, natural language processing, or data annotation or video annotation, the subjective way, where there is no one or yes or no answer, helps to have a better answer which represents more the world. And as we all know around the table, unfortunately, the algorithms are created by men, majority. The annotation and the work are done majority by the woman. So having this only woman angle on top of the impact that we have on those women is definitely a request from our customer.
It's very reassuring to see that, to hear that, this is something people actually think about these days. So glad to hear it. Now, on a kind of slightly different but similar idea, if you look more broadly at kind of the ecosystem of the AI makers and so forth, what how would you describe kind of the impact of maybe increasing diversity in the ecosystem and generally the space from a diversity point of view, and how do you think this can be improved, really?
Right, great question. Thank you, Raluca. Well, let's first look into what ethics actually mean, right? And it's defined as the moral principles governing the behavior or actions of an individual or a group. That's the standard definition. In other words, we're looking at something that we can describe as rules or decisions that help us to determine as human beings whether it's right or wrong, great or bad. That's our kind of gut feeling that plays a role in defining what we consider to be a good example and a bad example. And ethics linked to the good side, unethical behavior or pattern goes with the wrong side of life. In AI, it is quite a tricky aspect because machines are not human beings, and they shouldn't be perceived as such as human beings, because that's where the difference is or lies. Diversity and inclusion becomes a very crucial part in enabling the understanding, first of all, of our human behavior, how we treat each other, where we are respecting each other and accepting each other, and not making decisions based on some biased concepts that are in our heads. At the same time, it is strongly important, especially on the tech teams, whether they are data scientists or machine learning engineers, to enable them to open their view on things, to create this open-mindedness approach, to stimulate the ethical application, not only interaction on the team, but exactly forming the data sets and writing the algorithms that are inclusive by design, that are less biased. We cannot use the word unbiased. That's not going to happen. That's how we are as humans. Here and there we have our opinions, but we need to work together to minimize the biases that we tend to even conduct subconsciously. Like if a new neighbor comes and he or she or they are different, we tend to get it as a like, oh, who is that person? Do I trust him, her, them? And that is exactly the same how machine behaves. We need to train and teach in order to make the decisions, but machines don't have that gut feeling that we do. And us putting the respect and ethical approach will ensure that when face recognition is back to being unbanned and possible, that the cameras don't discriminate, when the job applications are streamed in the internet, that they actually reach everyone, not just men who, according to the history data sets, were in the leadership positions for eternity and beyond, or other examples where the whole interactions between machine and human beings are lacking that respect and inclusion. So we are looking at various sides of life. So corporate is one thing where you drive big data and a lot of decisions, and that becomes very important. But also startup ecosystem where it's highly unbalanced, gender unbalanced, and also requires to have more founders like Luca and her partner Iris in removing the biases focus, and with Ethic AI as a company. And also, we need to educate people and create awareness that they teach the machines to algorithmically maximize the fairness. And that's, I think, what's important in relation to diversity and inclusion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you a lot. Thanks a lot for that comprehensive overview, Eve. Kind of on the general topic of the kind of, I guess, diversity in job roles related to AI or in response to AI. Terralyn, obviously, your startup is about, is related to career development, recruitment, and this is an area which is, strife and ripe for some sort of debiasing. How do you feel about this topic, and what do you guys do to kind of deal with it?
Yeah, no, thank you, Raluca. So first of all, thank you to the entire Women in Tech team for putting this on and advocating for these kinds of conversations. And it's a pleasure to be speaking with you. So Futurefit AI is a company that works with large companies and governments in anticipating workforce change and helping workers make faster, smarter, and more successful career transitions in the age of disruption and automation. So what this means is that we actually use the tools of data and AI to anticipate and optimize for better career outcomes. So whether you're, someone getting back into the labor force and you're interested in advancing your digital competencies or getting involved in AI, those are the kinds of career transitions that we're really interested in seeing happen. But in that work, we're working with companies, specifically their HR teams, their workforce planning teams, and digital transformation teams, to advocate thinking about, okay, how can I have a bunch of data about my workforce. How can I now optimize my talent pipeline at every stage? So you're seeing all kinds of use cases from talent acquisition to recruitment, development, retention, and performance. And so those are all like the prime areas that AI has been used, because they're easy cases to say, we have some data about how people have moved within the company. Now, how can we kind of optimize those flows of talent within our workforce? I think what we're really trying to do is say, you spent a lot of time bringing people in, moving them around in different roles. Well, what about when someone actually leaves the company? Do you just forget about them, or are you actually making sure that they're invested in and that they're taken care of to actually find their next opportunity? So it's kind of that latter half of the pipeline that we're really interested in making sure that as workers, as human beings are taken care for, no matter where they are within or outside of the company. And I think at the beginning of all of this, when HR was really understanding how much data they had to work with, I think there was a tendencies, and I think with any technology, we go through a kind of Frankenstein moment where we say, like, we kind of realize like what we've created, what we've done, and the power that it holds. And we realize with great power comes great responsibility, right? So I think within the HR space and in the spaces that we work, I think what you've seen is there was this tendency to treat data on people like any other data set. So there was this tendency to treat humans like they were widgets, where they could just be popped into different roles, popped into different job titles if they had the skills, without really understanding that there was a human on the other side of that. So I think having a human-based approach, having human-centered design at the core of your technology, at the core of your software development process is really, really important. And so I think also human resource teams also thought, we're humans, we're the human part of the company. We're not going to need AI to do our job, or it is going to be hard to automate certain parts of what we do. But that's actually not been the case. I mean, companies take in up to 5 to 10 million resumes per year. That's a lot of data processing. So a lot of what HR does is actually process data about individuals and talent at their company. So now you're actually seeing up to 90% of HR teams having some kind of AI within their job role, within something that they do within companies. So it's actually grown quite a bit just over the last 5 years.
Great. No, thank you for that perspective. I think there's such different and interesting angles to look at. One, I guess, how this idea of human-centered recruitment or HR processes, and how we can use AI. The other around data labeling and how including diversity at that stage in the process would make quite a big difference, which I can totally see how from a practitioner's point of view. And then Eve's point of view around really kind of changing the face of the ecosystem, because it can't all be the same face really. So yeah, no, these are all amazing perspectives. Now, if we go into a question that's like a little bit more general, and it's really for all of you. How do you think this kind of idea that more demographics should be better represented in the future in the workforce that builds this kind of technology will happen? So if right now maybe we're not in a great place when it comes to diversity in the field overall, and whether it's at the different stages of like kind of the process, how do you think that is that going to improve? And also what's going to be the cause and like truly the a key driver for it in your kind of opinion? And actually, Isabel, do you wanna give like your opinion first, and then we can kind of go through everyone else?
If I understand your question is about how I see the diversity in the future evolving and how it's going to what is going to be the implication of this diversity. Did I hear well? Because it was cut.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and how do we get there, wherever there is? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we will have to live with diversity. The world is changing, and even at level as a small company like IAIAS, based in France, but working with international people and international customer, the people now who are looking for a job is definitely super diverse. And so diversity is something will happen. Now, how do we make sure that we do not leave some people on the street because we are only focusing on others? Terraline, you are in the right spot in working on HR education. Personally, I always say that the world of tomorrow is a digital world. You like it or you don't like it. It's an AI world or not an AI world. It's not the question. The question is you got to be educated and capable of transforming yourself in a very fast-mode way. And how do you do that is through education for sure, but also as a woman from a community role model kind of spirit. If you see Terraline, a young woman doing great things, or Eve or you, Raluca, and you say, well, she did it and I can do it. And I truly believe, strongly believe in the role model part. And the third component, the world has 52% women, so it's got to be a stronger place for the woman in the technology industry, and having the possibility to do things online where you can have multiple days in one day, like work from home and all those kind of stuff that technology would not allow you. Without the technology, you would not be able to do it, is a great positive move for having a woman in the technology sector. So to summarize is, yes, it's going to improve. We got to put quota. We got to put more role. We got to put more successful women in the tech area, more diverse role model, not only women, but so people can see, well, if they've done it, this is what we're doing. And this is what we're trying to do at IAIAS. This is why we're focusing only on women. This is why 5% of our business model is giving back to education and supporting the most vulnerable women so they can get access to the best education and prepare themselves for a digital job in the future.
Great, thank you for that, Isabel. I mean, I fully agree with with everything. But I'm just wondering, I mean, Terraline or Eve, what do you guys think about that? Shouldn't have used the word guys, but you know.
Yeah, so I think just off of what Isabel said, I love that I can do it attitude. So role models going out there and showing what's actually possible. I think the danger sometimes in fixating on like gender differences or access to opportunity is that sometimes the tendency to get into like a victimized mindset of, well, I'm a woman, it's so much harder for me and I probably won't make it. Like it's really not what we want to be advocating for, even though we want to identify where there have been bottlenecks or issues with things like talent pipelines and access to opportunity. So I'm a big advocate for if you believe you can do it, if you have the mindset, you want to go after something, then you can do it. Doesn't matter what your gender is, doesn't matter how you identify. So I think that's really, really important. And then there's two other things I would say. First, as myself being in a product role and really passionate about product, I don't think that you necessarily have to be a highly technical person or machine learning engineer or even a software developer to want to actually be involved in shaping how AI is developed. I think product management and product leadership is just as important in identifying how you translate business objectives to how technology is built at the end of the day. And I think product roles are in a really key position in saying, hey guys, like we need to identify an AI ethics framework. We need to make sure that that's part of our roadmap. I think there is a lot of different ways about how work is evolving and how technology is built that can incorporate and be used to access different kinds of talent and bring diversity into the conversation in terms of how product teams look. And then the second thing I would say is that because I think a lot about how work is changing over time, I think that as companies become more digital, as AI is more applied, I think there are going to be different kinds of work and different kinds of opportunity, different kinds of jobs and skills that's going to be needed in the future of work. And again, it's not just going to be isolated to an AI engineer. There's going to be all kinds of roles that need to become data and AI literate that can help shape how technology is built.
And I'll second to that. No matter what the job is in the future, well, not tomorrow, not next year, but a lot of jobs are changing. Most of them will be impacted with the amount of data, big amount of data to go through, find the essence of what the data means and be able to translate it into some kind of human speech and approach to the decision making. So knowing that the whole world is becoming more automated and we are relying on devices, we also, I believe, need to keep in mind that a naive application of algorithms, and that's what enables our devices to operate and communicate with us and help us in creating the decisions, that naive application of algorithms to everyday problems could actually amplify structural discrimination. Women in AI is a global nonprofit do tank, and what we do, we actually challenge the status quo of technology from the ethical, inclusive perspective, and run research, run various experiments, and what we see that the reproduction of biases is very easy, and if you once put it in data sets and especially make it open source and other people start copying, not knowingly, they just replicate the whole harmful way of applying technology. And to prevent that, what the other speakers mentioned, education is key, creating awareness of the biases being present in technology, because humans are biased, well, all of us are here and there, and be able to spot the bias and challenge it and question it and mitigate it. Mitigation of bias is a very hard thing because we've been in AI fields for years now, building those data sets and growing CPU power. But what's there needs to be really cleaned in order for us to create this beautiful and very collaborative and ethical and respectful world that is driven by the machines. Machines are copying us, making the decisions. And in the worst case, algorithms, if we continue with the biased approach, could really just simply deny services to minorities or impede people's employment opportunities or get the wrong political candidates elected and many other things. It's discrimination, what we're talking about, but also technical abuse. You really should be very cautious when dealing with technology and data. And I believe the organizations like Women in Tech, Women in AI, or Women in Voice, and I can continue naming, we are really there in order to support the whole movement to make the world a better place technology-wise.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I think one thing that I hear a lot from this panel just across is kind of the idea that companies and individuals should be kind of self-directing towards this ethical ideal, let's say, of as little bias as possible. But on the other side, there is the potential for regulation as well. So how do you, feel is a very loaded term, but how do you feel about regulation? Because ultimately, while I do believe that the driver should come from each of us, realistically, like a law can't really help. And we're all in either Europe or Canada, which are looking into regulation a little bit more closely on this topic. So what are your thoughts? I don't know, whoever wants to, Isabel, you want to tackle this one? Yeah.
My view on regulation, and especially when you're based in Europe, it seems to me that is sometimes stronger and more strict than it is in other continents. But I see it as a positive thing. It has two ways to look at it. One is for us at IAIAS, it has an impact on how we build our tool. So, for example, when it comes to a data annotation tool for face recognition, we have a way to only remove some part of the face, so the data cannot connect you to another data that will recognize you. So we got to do more development, same as when we do food recognition on a tray. So the tray pass, you got to recognize the different pieces of carrots, steak, potatoes. And if the phone is on the tray, if the badge is on the tray and potentially there is a face or the picture of the person or the picture of the kid on the phone, we have the tool which has been developed to avoid that our communities see those personal things. So definitely on an IT development side of things, it is more work. Now, the way I see the world of AI and learning those algorithms, more and more, we're having smart tools. So tools who are clever or become more and more clever. And where it's going to be more focused on is not on the preparation of the data to teach the algorithm, but more on the control of the machine. And is the machine, has the machine done right? Has she performed the way it is supposed? So I see in the future the control being more and more important. This is what we call human in the loop. So having more regulation on that will push us towards that direction. And I only see that as very positive.
Yeah, thank you, Isabel, for that. I mean, I think we're all kind of fans of human in the loop, but Terralyn, I feel like you're implementing this a little bit more directly in your product. What are your kind of thoughts on just the general topic of regulation as well, given this human in the loop perspective?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I could say. Obviously, in my current role with our company, we obviously follow regulation that's been set out. We're not as involved in actually forming or shaping future regulation, but actually before Futurefit, I actually worked in the federal government of Canada, and we were starting to implement algorithms to improve social policies within actually in the field. So we were developing some of the early stages of algorithm within government, and our government here has been really interested and concerned about how algorithms are developed and deployed for government use cases. And I was involved in a series of roundtables and consultations that went into feeding what we eventually adopted as a department, which were guiding principles for how we treat data and how we treat algorithmic design. So I think a lot of how I've seen regulation shaped comes from basic principles that everyone kind of agrees, okay, here are some ethics and morals that we'd like to support and advocate for, and here's how they look in terms of guiding principles. I think it becomes a little bit trickier to actually implement and hold companies and product teams actually accountable. So something like human in the loop, where I've now had a role in making sure that's a key component of our own technology design process. There's a variety of ways that we do it, but it would be a little bit difficult and challenging to actually check off a bunch of boxes to pass a regulation, so to speak. So the enforceability of that becomes a little bit harder. But just for an example, the way that we've gone about that in our own technology design is, if we want to be automating, and some of the predictions that we make are around career paths and career guidance, we've actually looped in not only users and doing user discovery and user interviews and saying, is this relevant to you? Is this helpful to you? We've actually looped in career coaches saying, how we're designing this, how we've gone about our algorithmic design, does this match up with best practices when it comes to career coaching? So the tool itself, at the end of the day too, it's not meant to automate a career coach. It's actually meant to augment and improve the capabilities of a coach. So those are just some things that I think we've done when it comes to that human in the loop component to make sure the algorithm is as ethical as we can make it at the front stages. But I think the enforceability when it comes to regulation is still quite difficult.
Yeah, you mentioned actually some cases of benefit systems being supervised, and I think something happened in the Netherlands on this topic. So yeah, we'd be keen to hear your thoughts, because I feel like there's so many kind of different angles on this regulation topic.
Well, yes, I have some examples, actually good examples to share. So what we're talking about is making AI I was checking that I'm not on mute while speaking. Making AI systems more transparent. So policymakers need to implement guidelines that make AI decisions with respect to ethics more transparent. And how do we do that? To define it, to enable it, is by setting ethical metrics and outcomes. So machines cannot, as I mentioned before, rely on gut feeling if it's good or bad. But there should be more transparency on how engineers quantify ethical values before programming them. And it comes back to the human beings, how we treat the data sets and algorithms, and how do we really quantify the ethical values as well as the outcomes that the AI has produced as a result of these choices. For example, in the case of autonomous driving cars, right? We need to look into a use case from Germany, where Germany's Ethics Commission on Automated and Connected Driving has recommended to specifically program ethical values into self-driving cars to prioritize the protection of human life above everything else. So let's imagine there is a accident on the road, and in the event of unavoidable accidents where it's autonomously driven, in the event of that accident, the car should be prohibited to offset victims against one another. So what I mean, in other words, a car shouldn't be able to choose whether to kill one person or based on individual features such as, let's say, age. Let's kill this person because that person is older, had more life to live, and this one is younger, has the whole future in front of him or her or them. So it needs to be really, again, unbiased, so whether it's age, gender, physical, mental, constitution, when a crash is unacceptable. We need to put the metrics in. And one good example of what is being done is crowdsourcing human morality. You need to interview a lot of people before you can measure it and build it into the algorithm. So machine will be relying on the specific pattern or definition of that, what's ethical or not. So MIT's, you know what I'm talking about. MIT is more of a machine project. If you haven't heard, please do Google and visit and learn from it. It shows how crowdsourced data can be used to effectively train machines to make better moral decisions in the context of self-driving cars. So back to that case. And they, what they did, they simply started interviewing thousands and thousands of people, putting the responses of human beings into these certain categories and brackets to understand how to convert it so the machines will be able to become more ethical when making decisions. And what is that ethics that we're talking about? It's hard if the accident has to happen and one person has to die just because there is no way around it. But how do you make a decision? And that's the whole big dilemma that we're experiencing today training the machines. I would say it will take us years till we get there to really categorize everything, label each data, and enable the flow of decisions. In situation A, the outcome should be B or C, and so on and so forth. But we're on the right track. And I think the more we are balanced in gender on the, especially tech teams, the more we are balanced in gender and ethnical backgrounds and perceptions on things like everything on the senior level and then across ecosystems and organizations, that's where we can start having the proper and approach to the ethical implementation of technology.
Well, that's a very interesting example. I think I do. This is my opinion. I shouldn't say it, but I do. What I think I appreciate kind of people taking the time to look into the ethical frameworks. I'm just sometimes there's two concerns on my side. One is that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Actually, the first is that. When it comes to regulation, it's just very hard to regulate. Like, are they going to regulate the metric, a number? What is it supposed to regulate? I think you do see some interesting U.S. laws around the 80-20 kind of rule when it comes to discrimination, which might be an example. But we're not sure, like in the EU, and I don't know about Canada exactly. But it would be nice to see some examples of something more clear to regulate and clear for people to follow. And secondly, I do worry that when it comes to ethical frameworks, I don't want us to get distracted from the actual fixing it. And I think that's the ban of regulation. I think if people start talking about it, it never happens, and then just kind of everyone forgets about doing the thing. So yeah, I would love to hear some thoughts on this rather rambling statements I just made. And on Eve, I feel like you would have an opinion.
Could you please summarize the question once again? So my question is, well, it's not a question necessarily, but it's a maybe controversial comment, which is translating ethical frameworks into regulation is very difficult. And my concern is that it's putting people away from the actual, slightly more pragmatic approaches to, actually getting people to make some change. But that's my very pragmatic, non-regulatory kind of mindset. So yeah. What's your thoughts? Do you think that's right? Or do you think actually we should really do our jobs very diligently by coming up with an ethical framework? There's such different sides to things. Great ambition and intention to have more role models. And to see the change, we need to kind of measure it and apply some quotas. So we have 30% quota on the executive boards where you have to have 30% women. As an example, nothing to do with the machines, but the leadership and the whole gender, bridging the gender gap. Now, what happens when we have those quotas on the teams? And then the quota is, right, the recruiters will say and see, we need to have at least 10% of people who are people of color. We need to have, let's give it a thought, 15% people who are LGBTIQA, all the rainbow specifics. So there's another quota. And then there's a third quota and people with hidden superpowers, as I call them. So here and there, something different about them, whether it's mobility or vision or hearing. What happens with many workplaces is that it stops being about really bridging the gaps in the system. It becomes filling in the quotas. So it happens that, oops, I'm not reaching my quota. Let me hire more people of color just because I need them for my quota. It's not because we really want to have the change and enable the balance. And that's where we also need to educate, whether it's policymakers or the leadership or the recruiters or anyone else regarding, there is a framework, we need to follow it. But first think why we do it. So why is the first thing to give a thought to, and then how and what the quotas are meant for. Boasting the diversity inclusion reports at the end of the year saying that we filled in the gaps, but at what cost? Because then people who are those minority groups, they feel marginalized and then being kind of used. Yeah, they need a job. They probably will pick the job, but not because they were spotted as a human being that has talent. It's just because, you're a little bit darker and I like it. And Raluca, what you and Iris are doing with ETIC, this is another example I think would be good to share in this webinar, in this talk, because you actually use technology to democratize AI by removing the biases and make it more human-centered. So if you could at some point share the example of how you do it, because it's so hard to enable.
Yeah, sure.
But also Caroline, I saw the hand or trying to speak.
I mean, Caroline, I would imagine you would have some potentially strong opinions on this.
Yeah, no, I love the question and I love Eve's response as well. And I'm all about the controversial questions are more interesting to me, so I love it. So your question around like, there's a problem to be solved, but are we fixating on the solution rather than actually getting to the root of the problem is kind of the essence of the question I heard. So I'm a big fan of first principles thinking. So always going back to like the simplest form of the actual problem or question that we're interested in solving for. And I think, I mean, for us and for me in terms of the working in the HR space, and then obviously having diversity, equity, and inclusion being at such a forefront now of the conversations around, especially like whether you're talking about AI or just hiring strategies. I think I'm a much bigger fan, and I would put much more emphasis on equal access to opportunity rather than to outcome. I think things like quotas that measure outcome are tools in a wider tool set. They're not the core solution. I don't think that they can be viewed in isolation. So for example, this relates both to your initial question and the topic that we're talking about. When we're talking about gender balance in the workforce, does that also mean some of the most dangerous occupations that are entirely filled with men that women may not even have a preference for? Do we need gender balance there? Or so are we going to be selective with the kinds of occupations we're talking about when we talk about gender balance? So if there is an algorithm designed for mining occupations or pipe occupations, Canada has a very large oil and gas industry that is mainly dominated by men, but it's also because those occupations are highly dangerous. So when you're building out predictive algorithms for those hiring decisions, what are you going to emphasize gender balance just like you would in white collar work? So there's some really interesting questions. I don't have the answer. Those are really hard conversations to have, but sometimes they're not even being had because people are so scared and they're so fixated on the agreed upon solution, which is the quota, which is the outcome variable. So I just think sometimes we shy away from the controversial questions, and I'm really glad you at least brought one up here today.
I just want to add, I agree on all what has been said, but my personal opinion, based on my longer experience you guys have in the business and what I've seen, and good things have evolved in a very positive way. I agree quota is not the solution, but it fosters evolution. And by pushing people to think about maybe a different process in recruitment, maybe accepting diversity. Today, I have to say, we got to educate the managers, the leaders, to manage with diversity. And the reason why sometimes we have not so much diversity is because people in the HR space recruit the ego. I mean, the person who looks like you, because it's easier to be in the same world. And me as a manager, I know that I got to push myself out of my zone or my rules or the way my brain is thinking to kind of open my so if I have a quota or some kind of KPI that I know potentially I'm punished if I don't follow, I agree this is not the solution of the core problem. I completely agree with you, but it helps. And I've seen, I come from corporation world where I have headed some leadership function. And when a company starts to measure how many VP I have, how many directors, or let's say diversity, women, and so on, I've seen progress. So I just want to say personally, I'm in favor of quota.
Yeah, I mean, it is a divisive topic, shall we say. But no, these have been very tremendously kind of illuminating opinions. I would like to kind of maybe transition a little bit into something slightly more, I don't know if positive is the right word. I mean, not that this was negative, but I think, we're focused a lot on, and I think especially what we do with ethics, like Ava was saying, we're definitely focused on the more, shall we say, negative elements of machine learning and how a lot of these biases get in from data, from the people, from wherever, and how can we fix these biases, because it should be easier to fix it for an automated decision system than it is to fix it for like a human being with all the complexity that this human being would entail. But so that's like a slightly negative angle on it, but the positive spin on it is that actually, if you do have a machine learning based system, a little bit similar like with quotas, it is possible that maybe in the end this system will be more objective than like a human being. And I think that's kind of how the whole thing started, in a sense, that HR recruitment that's based on slightly more objective criteria that is not just about you looking at a person, or lending decisions that are not based on you knowing someone, whatever, getting a loan. can be more objective. So yeah, so that means that, this machine learning can help rather than hinder. So I'd just love to hear some thoughts on this. I mean, is this like a terribly optimistic perspective? Is it actually something that we could expect from the space? I mean, whoever wants to go first.
Sure, I'll jump in there. I think that's really at the core of what our company Futurefit AI is all about. We're actually using the tools of data and AI to augment some of the repercussions, some of the displacement that AI is actually going to have on the labor force. So in a similar vein, AI can actually be used to, while it might be biased because it's built off the data building blocks that humans have encoded into the data set, AI can actually, with some foresight and with some awareness, can actually be the tool that we use to identify where bias has historically existed, and then augment and be a tool for a decision maker to make better decisions. So I think, and this is something that we think about a lot, when we try to understand how the workplace is evolving with technology, right? So what is AI good at, and then what are humans good at? And then when it comes to, I think education is also really important here, to Isabel's repeated points around education, and rightly so. I think viewing AI as just another tool in the toolbox to make better decisions is really what AI should be. So humans, basically, AI can make predictions, and then it should be up to the human to make a value judgment on if that prediction leads to some kind of involvement or some kind of next action, right? So just because something should be predicted doesn't mean a decision needs to be made or an intervention needs to be done, right? So I think making sure humans are educated with the skill sets that they need, so critical thinking skills and a lot of the soft skills that we've seen kind of rise to the surface as part of the future of work conversation, I think those are going to be instrumental in making sure that humans can make the value judgments they need and use AI for opportunity rather than just thinking about the negative consequences that come about.
Yeah, that sounds... That sounds like it could happen. I would have to say, when I hear you speak, I kind of believe in it. I think on the education point and kind of the human and the AI tool, I think that's what we see a lot. That on the negative side, actually, a lot of the machine learning algorithms are just not quite understood, and some of the pitfalls are not understood, and we just need to go in there and just do some educating. And really, that could be a tool, or it could be like a webinar or whatever it is. People just need to kind of see how they work with this tool rather than just defer to it, really. But yeah, I'd love to hear more thoughts on like kind of the good bits about AI and equal opportunity agenda. Isabel?
Yeah, I have to say I completely agree, and I couldn't have said in a better way than Tereline said. The human will be the final decision maker. The AI will advise, will predict, will maybe ask for help. Because like a robot, I never been taught to do that. How am I supposed to do? So education is going to play a very important role. You got to be able to swim in the digital world. You got to be able to work with a machine, with an algorithm, with a robot. So that requires some hard and soft skills which are different from what we learned before. So this is a new age, but at the end, the human is should be the final decision maker, and we gotta make sure that what the machine does only brings things that the human wouldn't do in a better way, or help the human to have more time to think about subject which require some more creative things, or human think that human is human and machine is machine. That's my view.
So do you think we should defer? I mean, if I disagree with a predictive model, but it's because I saw the candidate or whatever, do you think you should defer to my opinion, my judgment? Sorry, this is just like a trick question.
it's a trick question. So I think for me, I compare it to a leader, a human leader. 20 years ago, we started to crunch data. So it was called View 360 degree. It was called data mining, business intelligence, and all those kind of stuff. Why? As a leader, when you are at the top of the mountain and you have all the folks below you, they come to you with some information and you got to make the right decision. Who has made a wrong decision? Me, of course. And why did I make a wrong decision? Maybe I was not capable of making the right decision, but also maybe I didn't have the entire set of data which will allow my brain to compute in an intelligent way to make the right decision, because you make a better decision when you have all the facts. So for me, this is why I'm saying that, is that the AI way should come up with, because it has touched a huge amount of data, so in a faster way than my brain could have done it. So the machine should come up with some options, solutions, because it has really looked at various angles that potentially I wouldn't have time and then at the end, it's like 20 years ago when I have all this data. As a leader, I make the decision. Today, as a human, I should make the final decision on a lot of things.
Sounds like a great analogy. I'm going to use it from now on. Eve, do you have any kind of, we only have a few more minutes left, so do you have any parting thoughts on this or any other topic related?
I guess I have to leave people a little bit challenged, because if we take the situation or one boiling hot for this discussion area, lethal autonomous weapons. So you have autonomous weapons who can kill. They are meant for that. And of course, we're talking military devices right now. But then how do you make a decision? When is it activated? Who does it kill? And then you can have wonderful people sharing their knowledge and ethical approach on the team. But the person above them running the team can always override according to his or her actual understanding of what's good or bad. And in military, it's always straightforward. There is a task, there is a mission, president said to do that, or someone else, well, we need to do something, let's just activate. And that's, again, what we have discussed, of course, education, but more inclusive leadership that needs to be there, and ethical leadership that needs to be open to various sides of the coin of that societal problem or a very hot and important discussion. In the Netherlands, we have various organizations that look into it. So Women in AI with Way Accelerate, the program is about ethical leadership and business acceleration for female founders. There are various institutions really making research, conducting research. And I would also encourage to look into the work of Civic AI Lab that is run by well, very, I would say, famous person in the Netherlands who is leading the cohort of AI leaders in the field. And Mr. Gebreab, or Dr. Gebreab, he is running Civic AI Lab in order to solve the societal issues by applying AI. They work with PhD professors and students, and they try to see what causes immobility, let's say, in the or inefficiency in the processes, like on the transportation. They're addressing right now the issue of mobility inequality, like within the certain age groups, and so on and so forth, and healthcare and everything that's so important to us as human beings. And they really want to challenge it and research it, investigate, and crowdsource the opinion in order to define and prevent one person show making the decisions when that senior leader overrules and says, I am the boss here, so I will make the decision right now. But there is some kind of benchmark that we call the the standard and how we define and measure that ethical approach, whether it's on a human level or machine level.
Great, thank you. We don't have much time, but Teralyn, Isabel, do you want any last thoughts you want to add to this panel, this conversation?
Maybe just quickly, I liked Eve's very last point on making sure we're measuring things in the context of the baseline that we should be comparing it to. So an AI might not be perfect out of the box. It may not be perfect as we kind of develop more strategies and techniques for evaluating and measuring bias. But is it better than the next best thing, which is a entirely human decision maker overwhelmed with data at their fingertips? So really understanding there is a combination of AI and human, and the baseline and the benchmark to beat is the default human decision-making process, which is not hard to do.
Yeah, I think everything has been said. So if to stay in, I think nobody is perfect. Machine is not perfect. Human is not perfect. Everybody will make mistake. Human will make mistake. Machine will make mistake. Let's get the inspiration that we have a world tomorrow where through education, through environment, we take the best out of human, and the best out of human will do the best out of machine, and so the best of the two will give the best results.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you all of you, and to the Women in Tech organization for this panel. My kind of party words are obviously with ethic, we just really are focused on building software that helps people kind of remove these biases from their machine learning. This is kind of ground zero, and we're a little bit surprised that these solutions don't already exist in a very plethora kind of way. So it's very important, but also reassuring for me to see so many different angles of tackling this problem, and so much concern and kind of thought put into increased diversity in this space. So thank you very much, all of you, and hope to talk again soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.